There's a lot of style over substance within AR or any innovative technology like VR as well. Why are we doing it? Is it going to benefit the user in long term? Or is there another way of doing it that's equally easy, that they're more familiar with and they're more likely to interact with? So we've got an open kind of generic Dell computer in front of us now. I have created a 3D tracking model, and using augmented reality we can superimpose information. In this case it's the riser card cage that it shows the user how to pull out. You have to flick the switch at the bottom and pull that out if you need to replace any of the components within the motherboard. So I've just opened up the AR app, and you can see that it snaps to the different elements in the 3D object we have in front of us, and you can see at the bottom it has an animation about how a user would go about pulling out the riser card cage at the bottom. And this can be a linear experience, it can be an experience where the user has control of different use cases where they'd have a variety of different computers in front of them.
So people are already using this?
Yes, it's already being used kind of in industry, and it's starting to be used within education. So you've got the AR layer, which essentially is initializing the experience, bringing up the models, etc. And then you can add an HTML5 layer on the top of it, which can incorporate more user-led functionality, such as being able to use gestures, freezing the screen, that sort of thing. And that's using JavaScript-based library on top of the AR environment. So it kind of adds a bit more value to the AR experience rather than just showing something pretty. It allows the user to interact with it and get what they want from it. This is like using image recognition, so a simple image that's been printed out. And this is a small area of Greenwich in London. And the information originally came from quite a large data set surrounding geospatial information in the area of Greenwich in London. And through kind of 3D mapping, we're able to interpret the land use, whether it's residential, which business areas, the area of vegetation around the mapping itself. We can switch to different layers. This gives the user quite interactive potential in that they can turn the gestures on, they can scale it up, they can turn it around, they can move it away. They can freeze the tracking, which I guess a lot of students and users will want to do because holding up a device isn't really great user experience.
Yeah, it must be hurting your hand holding it up then.
Yeah.
Is that surely one of the issues with doing this, is holding a device in your hand?
Yeah, one of the issues is, you know, having to hold it in front of the environment or the image, but you can overcome that by using functionality that you can employ to freeze the tracking, and then you're able to take it away. You may have a group of friends that you want to interact with an image, and it's a lot easier being around a table looking at a static image where you're not forced to hold the iPad or device up in front of you. So being able to take it away from that initial tracking and then messing around with it and rotating it and doing loads of things with it.
So we've got here a printout and you're pointing a device at it. What's the difference between just not having the printout in the first place and just having the device? Why would you use AR in this instance rather than just...
I guess it's more of an immersive experience. It engages the user a lot more because they're part of that experience. Whereas if you imagine a lecturer in a theatre speaking to a large class, they're quite disconnected from the knowledge transfer. Here, they're part of this learning experience, they're engaging with something that they can see, it's very visual. They can interact with the environment in front of them more than they would if they were just taking notes or visiting a website or even messing around with a CAD model in a piece of software.
I've got to ask the question, surely this is a gimmick, isn't it?
I think in a lot of cases, and I think that's one of AR and any new kind of innovative technology short for, is that the money tends to be surrounding marketing and advertising, and that's what is projected into the mainstream media. So a lot of the detractors will say, yes, it's great, this advertising campaign is great for the first time that someone watches it, but what is the worth past that experience, users will, or visitors will not really go back to it in the future. So I think when I create anything to do with AR, it has to be quite immersive, but it also has to have quite a long shelf life. Users have to return to it and gain valuable insight, which they couldn't do in a 5-second advert. Like any learning resource, it needs to be something that's less of a gimmick and more tangible in terms of a good use of their time, because students are probably the biggest critics when it comes to any new technology. They will immediately switch off if they can't see the value in it, or if it's replicating something that they could already get quite easily.
Hollywood is depicting one version of AR. We watch something like Iron Man or whatever, and you're going to have, heads-up displays and all this sort of stuff going on. How close is that to reality? Things like Microsoft's new announcement.
Any sort of IT company are always trying to push the boundaries, and it's about managing expectations. I think if the users have an expectation that they can go into a holodeck like Star Trek Generations and be completely immersed, it's probably not realistic. And one of the issues at the moment is the hardware is kind of holding back the innovation. So there's great ideas that are out there, but it's just the hardware. For instance, 3D models. Anything over about 20,000 polygons in a 3D model, and it will crash the app. And that's detrimental to mainstream adoption, I think. So if you had a user experience where the user is going to become frustrated, it's not going to work effectively, I think we're a long way from what the HoloLens predicts will be something that we'll interact with on a daily basis.
You mentioned a certain amount of polygons, so going back to that view you had there of Greenwich,
yeah.
How many polygons is something like that showing?
I think there's about between 5,000 and 10,000 polygons, but the original area that I wanted to deal with was millions. So having quickly learned that that doesn't translate into a good learning experience for a mobile environment, you have to manage your expectation, and if that means like limiting the amount of polygons, maybe the 3D models won't be as photorealistic as you want them, but in terms of the learning experience will be a lot more robust.
So you can create any colour you like on your monitor by varying the different amounts of these 3 colours. On a printer, we work in a completely different way. So we're not talking about light anymore, we're talking about ink.